merged your leads and deals processes together in one report. So you don't have two separate reports for leads and deals. You can see it all in one place. Then you can start to see how well are people progressing through the system, how many opportunities are passing through these different stages for 2023 or whatever time you choose. And then what's the drop-off rate? Are we having 100% pass-through rate, or are we having some fall off in certain points of the process? If there is fall off and we can view that in the process, then we can determine strategically how we're going to develop the system over time instead of just doing it on a whim because Zoho released a new feature and we want to use it. We could say, hey, this is the part of the process that's struggling. What features can we enable to better support the customers in their journey? You can even see the drop-off percentage on a macro level in this customer journey funnel report, which just allows you to view everything that's going on and see major drop-off points in the process. If you don't know how Zoho CRM is designed to be used, then good luck implementing it right. You need to see the whole picture before you attempt to implement Zoho CRM. After having a demonstration, you need to document your processes properly. If you don't have your processes documented, then you can make a copy of my process documents and make adjustments to them as needed. Once you have your processes documented, it's time to customize your CRM. Now, this is the true value of having a CRM, not just having your data stored, but being able to present your stored data in relation to your processes. Once your CRM is customized, then you can put your data into Zoho CRM by doing a data migration. Full transparency, migrating your data is usually the hardest part of an implementation. We'll go in depth on how to migrate your data properly. Now, just because you migrate your data over doesn't necessarily mean your team will actually use the system. Your organization won't rise to the promised capabilities of Zoho. They will fall to the level of their training on how to use Zoho. Once your team gets access to power user training, you should execute a launch plan. If you don't have a launch plan, you can make a copy of mine and adjust it as needed. Once you've launched your CRM in the real world, the real work begins with continuous improvement and development. And while Zoho CRM improvement is beyond the scope of this video, if you comment below asking, I'll consider making a Zoho improvement strategy video. Now that I've laid out the strategy, here's how this video works. There's a section in this video dedicated to each part of my implementation strategy. Most people do a Zoho CRM implementation like they are doing a sprint. And while it's good to implement Zoho fast, it's much better to implement it right. Take a step back and be strategic before jumping in. Be consistent and do the right things instead of going fast, giving up, then blaming the software. If it's always the software's fault, the software really isn't the problem. It's not about doing everything right. It's about doing the right things. And that's where we're going to focus on in this video. Now, if you hover over the timeline of the video, you'll see each section is labeled accordingly. In order to get the most out of this video, ask yourself the questions on the strategy card. As you ask yourself each question, you'll be guided to the section that is most relevant to your needs. Implementations don't happen overnight, so this video is designed to be continually referenced as you implement Zoho CRM. This video is also modular, meaning each general section can exist independently from the video while still giving you all the context that you need to move your implementation forward. Each section will weave in and out of important concepts and practical tactics for implementing Zoho CRM correctly. So make sure to start from the top of the strategy card and work your way down with each question. Now, my name is Drew Brockbank, and I'm a Zoho consultant and an official Zoho partner. I've managed $8 million dedicated to Zoho development, and I built Zoho over 100 times for 100 different organizations. I'll link to additional free Zoho training below, along with my various free Zoho templates. And if you feel like this video is helpful, please like and subscribe to the channel. If any questions come up, feel free to leave a comment below, and I'll be sure to help you out. Finally, if you are signing up for Zoho, please use the link below and sign up and support the channel. You're going to quickly cover CRM implementation costs before getting into the meat of Zoho CRM implementation strategy. Expect to invest anywhere from $0 to $15,000 on consulting when doing a Zoho implementation. Now, this doesn't include future Zoho development spend. I'm simply referring to the initial cost of deploying your first version of Zoho for your organization. I know that's a big range, but if you are a solopreneur, you can do this for $0 by following this video's instructions. It's just going to take you a bit of time. Most organizations I've worked with end up investing $10,000 to $15,000 on consulting during an implementation. However, I've had clients invest anywhere from $2,000 to $85,000 on Zoho consulting. The implementation cost really depends on how much data you are looking to bring over and how much configuration you are looking to do beforehand. Now, I recommend building and implementing a simple working version of Zoho CRM for your initial implementation before you go about heavy configuration. I recommend this because of Gall's law, which states a simple working system must precede a complex working system. Any attempt to build a complex working system before a simple working system will result in failure. Hence, the well-known high failure rate of CRM implementations. Cost of software ranges from CRM to CRM. If you are going with Zoho, which I recommend that you do, you can expect to pay $47 per user per month billed annually on the low end if you are looking to take advantage of Zoho One, which I recommend that you do. Now, organizations I've worked with are primarily on Zoho One. For context, there's many critical factors to consider when choosing a CRM. With that being said, I'm covering cost as opposed to functionality factors because most CRMs are becoming commoditized, or in other words, they are all starting to do the same things with different coats of paint. Most people can't even use 5% of the features available in most CRMs, so it really comes down to cost and potential platform usage, which is where Zoho dominates. Now that we have a better understanding of what it costs to implement Zoho CRM, let's dive into a demonstration. Having a proper demonstration of Zoho is extremely important because without seeing the full picture, you'll fail to successfully implement Zoho. Now, this demonstration covers more than what you will be implementing as a first version of Zoho, but I can't stress enough that you need the full picture so you can put the pieces together over time. Every organization is trying to build the system that I'm about to show you, but not many people know how to build it. I don't want you flying blind while implementing Zoho, and if you don't have a proper demonstration, you are going to fail to implement it because you will essentially be flying blind. So we are going to do a demonstration from marketing preparation to lead in to deal closed won. Now, some quick definitions before I go into the CRM and do this demonstration. A lead is an unqualified opportunity to do business with someone. A deal is a qualified opportunity. Qualification is your way of determining if someone is a good fit for what your organization offers. BANT is a popular qualification framework which stands for budget, authority, need, and timeline. For context, a lead is typically converted to a deal on the initial discovery call or sales call with a prospective customer. This can be a lot to remember. So go ahead and make a copy of this CRM journey document if you'd like to have a list of relevant CRM terms and definitions on hand. All right, so I don't want this demonstration to be excruciatingly boring for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a rapid fire demonstration. Now, before we get into it, I'm going to show you how to get Zoho One, and then I'll show you the system at large and we'll dive into each piece of the demonstration. So all you need to do to get Zoho One, and the reason I want you to get Zoho One as opposed to Zoho CRM as a standalone application is Zoho One has so much more. It's extremely cheap and it's the best offer that Zoho can make you. So I want you to see everything that's available there for free. Use the link below. You don't even need your credit card. You just throw out your company names, some of your contact information, and you are good to go. So once you do that, you'll be taken to Zoho One. And it's really hard to conceptually understand what Zoho can offer you. So I made this diagram so that we could break down the Zoho demonstration into bite-sized pieces. So here, what you can view is from left to right, how we're going to demonstrate this system. But you can also see it broken down into the applications and how the applications generally interact with each other from left to right. So first and foremost, we'll start with Google Sheets marketing. So the idea with Google Sheets is you can use this template that I built out to build your UTM parameters. If you don't know what UTM parameters are, essentially it's the way of tracking everything that you're doing on the marketing side. So what you're able to do here is you can say, hey, I'm going to schedule a LinkedIn post. I'm going to have a call to action. The keyword here is call to action. Every time you run a call to action, you need to make sure that you have UTM parameters in the link. A call to action is simply saying something like book here, learn more. Well, if they're going to click on that button and they're going to go over to your website, you need to make sure that you have UTM parameters. So if you're going to post on LinkedIn like I do often, or YouTube, you'd put LinkedIn source LinkedIn. The medium you'd put organic, the campaign you would put post, and the term you would put none, because that's really for search engine marketing or search marketing. And then you have UTM content that you can link to as well. Quick thing here, the reason I'm doing %20 is that converts to a space, and you can't have spaces initially within a URL. So make sure you just use %20 every time you want to do a space. All right, so what this produces is I have a formula here to just concatenate the different values. So you can actually copy this over and you can paste it, and you can paste it right into the call to action link that you have for whatever marketing material that you are producing. All right, quick thing here, and I don't want this to overwhelm you, but I think it's important. We're gonna go way more in depth on this report, but this report helps you understand why we're doing all of this preparation. Because sometimes we get into the technical nitty-gritty and we're like, why are we doing this? What's the big picture? Well, here is the dream. If you are in marketing or sales, operations, or if you're a small business owner, this is what you want, this report. And you can see it's broken down by lead source. So we can see advertisement, affiliate marketing, email marketing, Google AdWords. Our y-axis here is the different lead sources. Now, up here, we have the different stages of our customer journey. And so what I'm demonstrating for you today is how we build this system so that we can get these reports, and how we can build the system in the best way possible for both users, administrators, managers, and so on. So quick things I'm going to point out to you here. Let's say you're doing email marketing. This helps you answer a couple questions. How many customers or prospects have passed through different stages? And what is the conversion rate between stage to stage for these different customer journey statuses and stages? And then you can look at the very end of the funnel and you can say, hey, how much revenue have we made from each source in marketing? The cool thing here is because you're building UTM parameters out, you can just, excuse me, you don't have to just break it down by source. You can break down by medium, campaign, term, content, whatever information you're collecting. You can change out this information here for lead source on the y-axis, which is super helpful. All right, so back to the diagram here. We talked about Google Sheets marketing preparation. Let's talk about Zoho Forms. So the way that we actually get this information here inside this UTM parameter information, the way we actually get that into the CRM is through a form in Zoho Forms. And Zoho Forms does something that's really helpful because it's easy to build a UTM parameter link and include all that information. That's like the easiest part. The hard part is having a form absorb that information and push it over to Zoho CRM. So I'm going to show you how that works here. And essentially what goes on behind the scenes is you have on your website a form, right? So here I would click on Let's Talk. And then because the link contains UTM information up here, if I fill out this form, then Zoho Flow would trigger and it would take the information from the form and it would push it over to Zoho CRM. The reason that I use Zoho Flow, which is a Zapier-like automation tool that's provided by Zoho, is it allows me the most amount of flexibility for getting the information the way that I want and putting the information exactly where I want within Zoho CRM. One thing that's really helpful here is I can get the G-CLID and I do Google Ads. So that allows me to push over to Zoho CRM and get Google Ads information as well. So that's really helpful for me. All right. Quick thing here too, if you are using Sales IQ, you can actually get the sales or the visitor information right on the CRM record, which is really helpful as a rep, because before you have a conversation with someone, you can see that the products that they were interested in and how long they spent on different areas of the site so that you can see what they were really browsing for. It's both super creepy and super powerful. All right, so that's Zoho Forms. We're going to dive a little deeper into Zoho Sales IQ. So the way that you get that set up is you first get Zoho Sales IQ, which is a part of Zoho One. You just copy the code for the Sales IQ tracker, and then you throw that into your site, into an HTML block. I use Systeme, But if you're using a different content management system, maybe you are using WordPress or Wix, you just need to make sure that this code block is on the page of your site that you're wanting to track information. Now, once you have the information tracked in Zoho Sales IQ, you can actually bring it over to Zoho Analytics, which is Zoho's business intelligence platform. And you can see here all the visitor information that's being populated, where they exited. All this information is really helpful. And then again, you can, on the lead record, you can view all of the information that we're collecting here just related to that specific lead, so that when you have that conversation, you're able to have a productive and intelligent conversation with them based on the data that you collected. Now, the unique identifier for this, by the way, is the IP address. So that's the other nice thing about here in Zoho Flow is you can collect that IP address from the form, then you can push it to the lead to use it as a unique identifier for the Zoho Analytics or Zoho Sales IQ integration with Zoho CRM. That's how we're getting the data here. All right, so with that, we covered how to best prep on the marketing side, how to grab that information via Zoho Forms and push that into Zoho Flow via Zoho, or into Zoho CRM via Zoho Flow, and then how Zoho Sales IQ tracks information and then pushes that into Zoho CRM. Now we're going to dive a little deeper into how you would use Zoho CRM as a part of this larger Zoho One system. So the thing that you want to understand about Zoho CRM is, first and foremost, you want to make sure that your statuses and stages are being viewed in a Kanban view. And the reason that we do this is the value of a CRM is not just being able to store your data, but being able to store your data in relation to your processes. And so that's what we're seeing here, right? The different opportunities, the unqualified opportunities in our system in relation to where they're at in the customer journey. So you can see that's the same for the deals module. Now that I flipped over to the deals module, we got the qualification and the different deal stages here inside of our pipeline. Now, we also use this template, this journey doc, which you can find below, and we're going to go into documentation more in a different section of this video. But the idea here is that you get a shared understanding across your team for the different statuses and stages. Do these look familiar? Well, they should, because these are the lead statuses that we were just viewing earlier. They're just documented here so that everyone can look at quick definitions and marketers can see the segmentation list that each of these statuses are associated to. Now, this has other information like the different segmentation lists that I recommend that you build out, instructions, and I've even included a definitions section in this template if you're to download it now so that you can view that. One other quick thing here in documentation, you want to make sure that everyone is able to view this document. Not everyone should have access to edit this document. That should be reserved for administrators, managers, and leaders. But all the users should be able to access this document. That way you have strategic clarity and you're not being ambiguous about the different statuses and stages in your customer journey. This really helps users to get behind the system and for you to get some buy-in with your different users. All right, so once you jump into a deal, the nice thing is you can actually create a quote. So later down in your funnel process, when you're quoting somebody, you can actually get all that information together inside of Zoho CRM, and then the perfect pass point from Zoho CRM over to Zoho Books, if you're looking to take advantage of that, right? Here in the Zoho Finance Suite, if you're going to push over to Books, the best way to pass that information over is by converting a quote over to a sales order in Books. That's the best passing point because a sales order acts as a master record inside of Zoho Books. Once you convert a quote, you're able to take a sales order and then turn that into multiple invoices. And if you need a purchase order as well to get any goods to fulfill the order, then you can create a purchase order from that sales order. So again, quick thing, when you are creating a quote in Zoho CRM, you want to convert that over to a sales order inside of Zoho Books. I use a custom function to do this. Unfortunately, it's not out of the box functionality, but the out of the box functionality is not the best practice. So that's a key thing to note there. All right. When you're inside of the Zoho CRM Deals module as well, and you send out a quote, you can also send out a proposal for signature or that template for signature via Zoho Sign. If you're not familiar with Zoho Sign, it's essentially Zoho's DocuSign-like tool that allows you to merge information from the CRM into a document and then send it out for signature. So what that actually looks like is you can see here, this is information that has merged over from the deals module. So Bristol Myers Squibb Taylor Swift is the contact. It's merged over right here inside of the document. And then at the very bottom, I have sign field so that people can sign the proposal. So once you've got the proposal sent inside of Zoho CRM and you've structured your system from left to right, like we're seeing here with leads and deals, then you can again look at this report and say, okay, well now in this report, I have got my process from left to right. And then not just your leads process. Right here, we've merged your leads and deals processes together in one report. So you don't have two separate reports for leads and deals. You can see all in one place. Then you can start to see how well are people progressing through the system, how many opportunities are passing through these different stages for 2023 or whatever time you choose. And then what's the drop-off rate? Are we having 100% pass-through rate, or are we having some fall off in certain points of the process? If there is fall off and we can view that in the process, then we can determine strategically how we're going to develop the system over time instead of just doing it on a whim because Zoho released a new feature and we want to use it. We could say, hey, this is the part of the process that's struggling. What features can we enable to better support the customers in their journey? You can even see the drop-off percentage on a macro level in this customer journey funnel report, which just allows you to view everything that's going on and see major drop-off points in the process. So with that, we're going to go more in depth on how Zoho CRM ties into Zoho campaigns. Because our system represents our processes, now we're able to do advanced segmentation inside of Zoho campaigns. And all that means is we're trying to avoid the cluster, which is the situation in business where you have a mailing list in your marketing automation platform, whether that be Zoho campaigns or another application, where essentially you have all of these names and emails, tens of thousands of them, hundreds of them, but you have no idea where they're at in your process and you don't know what messages you should be sending these people because it's a customer. There's no way to differentiate one contact from another. And so the way that we avoid that situation is we have our segments built into Zoho campaigns like this. So if I jump into, let's say, the needs nurturing demo segment that we have here, and I go to edit this, I can see that the segment is built on the lead status, doesn't contain rejected. So what I'm saying here is if I go inside of Zoho CRM and I go over to this journey map, I'm saying, hey, if anyone is subscriber, lead, MQL, working, reached, or recycled, I want to market to these people differently because they are pre-qualified. So there's certain information I want to be able to send them. The thing you're also saying with this specific segment is you're saying, hey, if the deal stage is closed lost, so for whatever reason, if a deal fell through the cracks, I'm also wanting to send them the same communications because they are not qualified as well. So if you're wanting to send call to actions like book with our sales team, get with our sales team today, meet with an account executive, whatever it might be, book a clarity call, book a discovery call, you can now segment your list appropriately instead of sending a book with our sales team call to a giant list of contacts that could be customers or they could be unqualified leads. You don't know. So this is your way to understand your audience better and to properly segment them so that you can send the proper communication to people in your list. So that is how you can use Zoho campaigns in this Zoho One system. Now we're going to move over to how Zoho Desk and Zoho Projects tie into Zoho One. Before we get to Zoho Desk and Zoho Projects, it's important to understand what's called revenue operations. And revenue operations is how your business supports marketing, sales, and service. And we're talking today about the technical aspect of revenue operations, which is what is the technology that you use in your organization to support your day-to-day processes or operations. And the way to best do this within Zoho One as a whole and within Zoho CRM specifically is this. So if I was to mark a specific deal here as closed won, I send over the proposal, they signed it, awesome. They've signed with us, they could be marked closed won. Well, if I go ahead and close a deal here, then I can jump into their record and then I can push their information over to Zoho Projects, which is a work management solution, and then Zoho Desk, which is your customer service platform that allows you to provide better customer service. And the way that we push that data over is we go into Zoho projects. And because I have these applications integrated correctly, it makes it really easy on my side as a user to add the project here. And so I don't even have to jump out of Zoho CRM. I just have to go over to the related list, click on new project, and then I can select a template here and then type in zblitz or Kimberly Ryan. And then I can go over to next, and then I can save. And the nice thing about doing this inside of Zoho CRM is now the deals record and the project are linked. So if I need to reference information from either record, I can do that now instead of having to link it all manually, which is not the ideal way to do this. So now the project is linked right here. I can see project completion, the milestones, the tasks, the issues. And a popular use case for doing this is if you are signing a new client and you have an onboarding process, use Zoho projects to organize the work that needs to be done for onboarding. And then you can view the progress of onboarding right here inside of Zoho CRM. Then I can quickly click into a project right from Zoho CRM and then view that project's information here and all the tasks that are loaded up for me. I can just view them in Zoho projects. And because they're integrated, I'm not even leaving the CRM to do this. I'm seeing Zoho projects information from that application inside of Zoho CRM. So it's just a unified system. It's not a siloed system. All right, so that's how I can add a project here. The next thing I'm going to show you is how to take advantage of the Zoho Desk integration. So because I have that integration set up, I can just create tickets right from Zoho CRM as a customer service rep. I don't even have to jump into Zoho Desk to create a ticket. I can just create a ticket right from here. And if I'm a sales rep and I'm creating a ticket on the service team's behalf, or maybe I'm just a one-man band, I'm a solopreneur, I don't want to jump around, I just want to create a ticket right from here. Then I can go here, it's already linked up. The databases sync up between Zoho Desk and Zoho CRM. So we can just submit a ticket here. And then within the Zoho Desk application, a customer service representative or me as a solopreneur could just go into that system, and then I could jump into a ticket and reply back and forth and manage my different desk cases or issues right within Zoho Desk, but it was pushed over originally from Zoho CRM. So hopefully this rapid fire lightning demonstration of Zoho 1, the core applications and how to best use them together gives you an idea of what we're trying to build here. You know, I mentioned earlier in this video that if we can't get Zoho CRM right, if we don't get Zoho CRM right, we can't get Zoho 1 right. And so hopefully this gives you a better idea of the bigger picture for Zoho 1 and what we're trying to build. We are going to do a rapid fire demonstration of all of the relevant documentation for Zoho implementation. So I've combined all of that documentation into one spreadsheet. And if you look in the description below, you can make a copy of that. And I highly recommend that you do, because if you don't, then you're going to have all these documents spread out and it's going to be difficult to find them over time. You want to make sure it's all in one place. So what that actually looks like here is this document. And if you go and make a copy, you will see that it starts with a journey map. And we've got a lot going on here. The only two mandatory documents that you really need here for a successful implementation is a journey map and the launch plan. Implementation strategy is what we're going over in this video. So the idea here is the journey map goes over all of the definitions for the various statuses and stages in the system. So we're going to cover all of that together. And then we've got a launch plan, which covers how to actually, from a high level, tactically execute a successful Zoho implementation. So we're going to go over that as well. Then we got an implementation strategy, which is what we're going over in this video. I just want that to be handy for you. Then we've got this UTM builder. This is helpful on the marketing side of the house. Zoho lead scoring, also very helpful for marketing. And we've got marketing segmentation lists. And then I got a list of definitions here. So that's what we're going to be covering in this video. We're going to start with the two mandatory documents, and then we're going to move over to the optional documents, which I think are really helpful. But again, they're not exactly critical to a successful implementation. So let's start off with the journey map. So it's really difficult. I'm going to take a step back with you because it's really difficult in Zoho to see everything at a high level because everything's modular. So if you jump into the lead, you have tunnel vision for the lead, and same thing for deals and accounts and contacts. So what this document does is it allows everyone in the organization to have a shared understanding of what Zoho's about at a high level from a process standpoint. It's so much easier to understand things from a process standpoint. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over every single column in this document together, starting with browser in the leads module. So I've included this in the lead, but you really don't need the browser status inside of Zoho CRM. And a key thing to note here, each of these stages have a corresponding status. Each of these columns have a corresponding status or stage inside of Zoho CRM, except for browser. Because browser just means you've captured a browser visit on either Google Analytics, Zoho Sales IQ, or whatever software you want to use to capture that information. So if you want to represent browser data inside of a report, you can certainly do that in Zoho Analytics by hooking up to Google Analytics or Zoho Sales IQ. So that's browser. I just think it's important to know, hey, from left to right, things start as a browser. It's anyone on the internet. And then typically people fill out a form, and that's when they become a subscriber. So a subscriber is a raw lead. It's anyone who has filled out any form. Or it's anyone added to Zoho from an integration such as Zoom Info or Data Axle or any kind of list provider. If you're buying a list or you're renting a list out from like Zoom Info, that would be a subscriber. And the idea of a subscriber is before you have someone marketing ready, right? Let's say you bought a list of 10,000 contacts, which I don't really recommend that you do that, but maybe that's one of the things you're doing in your organization. You're buying a list. Before you actually go about marketing, before they are technically ready for marketing, you need to make sure that they have their email validated at the very least. And that brings us to lead marketing ready. So the idea here is, number one, the email is validated so that if you send out emails, you don't immediately get penalized, shut off your domain, and then make it so essentially you can't send out any communications from that domain at all. So that's what you want to avoid there. So you want to make sure that you hold people in subscriber until they are validated. Now, there is a way to actually do this validation automatically. And before I go any further, I just want to make you aware of this. So in this process, I understand that it's not exactly linear. So for example, we're talking about subscriber, lead, and browser. Well, someone can go from browser over to marketing qualified lead. They can make that jump because if you think about it, let's say on your website, you have a contact us form, like get in touch with our sales team form, and then you have a subscribe to our newsletter form. Well, if someone fills out the subscribe to newsletter form, they should go over to subscriber and then hopefully automatically get email validation and then end up as a lead for marketing ready. That's if they fill out a subscribe to newsletter. But if someone fills out a contact our sales team form, they could go from browser all the way to MQL. That would be appropriate because if someone says contact our sales team, they're sales ready. So sales should engage and get in touch with that prospective client or customer and initiate the conversation. What would be inappropriate is if someone filled out a subscribe to our newsletter form and instead of taking them to subscriber, you just immediately mark them as marketing qualified lead. So we're presenting this process as if it's linear, but just understand that I'm aware that there's cases where, someone might fill out a form and you might consider them not even a lead, but you consider them pre-qualified and they should just enter your deals pipeline module. So we're going to go over this as if it's linear, but I understand that in many cases, you don't have to go through every single one of these statuses in a linear fashion. But in reporting, in the last section of this video, we go over the report that really shows how well this process is working for your organization. You need to backfill all of the statuses and stages. So this is being built from left to right, but I understand that a prospective client may not actually go through each of these statuses individually, which is just fine. All right, so we went over lead. Let's talk about MQL. So a marketing qualified lead just means a lead is sales ready. So during these two statuses, you can see that this belongs to the marketers, the marketing team. And you may be thinking to yourself, Drew, I'm a solopreneur, or I'm a one-man band, or I have, it's just me working, but I've got a bunch of subcontractors. I'm really small. Or maybe you're a medium-sized business and you're a sales leader or a marketing leader. It doesn't matter. These things are really just so that you can scale over time. That's why I have things like contact owner down at the bottom. I just want to help you clearly separate who should be doing this, which activity in terms of revenue operations, which is marketing, sales, and service. Where does this fit in the process? Who does this actually belong to? So that's why that information is there. I understand that some of you may just be running solo, but it's still important to understand, hey, does this fall under marketing or sales? All right, so marketing qualified lead. Essentially what's happening with the two statuses before marketing qualified lead is marketing is sending out automated communications to different people in a contact list. And they might be sending SMS, they might be sending emails, but the idea is that we score those different interactions, behavior-based scoring and information-based scoring. And then once they breach a threshold, let's say it's 100 points, then they will move over to marketing qualified lead, which is essentially the handoff point to the sales team. And so that's why we have marketing qualified lead here. It's essentially the pass from marketing over to sales, which means sales ready. So that's the cue for sales to do something about this prospective client or customer, right? Essentially what we're saying with lead scoring is, hey, either they fit our ideal customer profile or they've interacted with enough of our communications that we are considering them qualified. So at this point, a sales rep will go into marketing qualified leads, and there's a couple of ways you can go about lead assignment. You can do it automatically or you can do it manually. So a really popular way to assign leads is round robin. So as a lead comes in, a marketing qualified lead, you essentially evenly distribute the leads coming in to a group of sales reps or salespeople in your organization. Now you can also do it manually. So you can first assign a marketing qualified lead to a sales manager. And then that sales manager can distribute the leads based on different competencies of the sales teams or specialties, or you can even distribute leads based on territory. So there's a lot of ways to distribute the leads or to assign leads, and there's a lot of automations and support in Zoho to make that happen for you automatically. I find a lot of people get worried with the automations. They just like to receive as a sales leader or manager an email, and then they like to distribute the leads from there, which is totally fine. It's just whatever works best for your organization. I actually suggest that you start with manual, and then as you notice patterns, and you notice opportunities for automation, then you can implement automatic lead assignment. But this is the cue for the sales team to look at leads that are ready for sales attention. So once a rep is here, they can look in a marketing qualified lead list in a Kanban view or in the list view in the leads module, and then they would mark that as working. So this is a very key stage because this is the big question. In your organization, what do you do as a sales representative to reach out to a lead? Now, this may be irrelevant to you if you have different prospective clients booked directly on your calendar. But still, if a lead comes in and marketing is saying, hey, that they're warm, they need some sales attention, what do you do next? So you want to make sure that this is very clear and you have your outreach cadence outlined. Now, Zoho has come out with a new feature called Cadence Studio, which allows you to put this process into the software in the best way possible. If you don't want to use something advanced like Cadence Studio, you can just list out in a document, hey, day 1, we send out an email. Day 2, we send out a LinkedIn message. Day 3, we make a phone call, and then we quit. At some point, you got to quit. You're not going to pursue every lead for eternity. You're going to at some point say, hey, enough is enough. We've done enough outreach attempts, whether that's 3 outreach attempts or 20. You need to determine that for yourself and your organization. So make sure that that is documented and you have it clear for your team. Hey, if you're working, let's make sure that these tasks, these outreach attempts are being completed. Now, let's say that you have that 3-day outreach cadence that I mentioned. Day 1, you're sending out an email. Day 2, a LinkedIn message. Day 3, a call. Well, let's say that prospective client is unresponsive. Well, you'd actually move them over to recycled. And that means they need further nurturing from marketing. hey, they're not a good fit right now. That doesn't mean they're never going to be a good fit. If they bounced, you'd want to send them over to rejected. But if they're simply not qualified, not ready to commit, or unresponsive, they could be a good fit later. And so they would be marked as recycled. So initially, a lot of these statuses, you're going to be moving them around manually, and there's going to be a lot of cleanup. But then you're going to notice the opportunities for automation, and that's when the system gets more advanced. When you're doing an initial implementation, you just need the statuses there. You don't have to have all the automation set up initially. Don't get in this big bang implementation mindset where you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to forget to mark everything recycled. It's okay. Leads can be a little messy at first, and then you can recognize different opportunities for automations and then implement them. Automations are a heavy lift activity, so it can drastically slow down your implementation. So you want to make sure that you do the right things, which is just get it customized, get in there. You can use it manually at first. And then as you get more familiar with the system, you can add advanced automations and make your system more complex. All right, so that's recycled. Then we have reached. So let's say, on the other hand, where a prospective client was unresponsive, let's say they were responsive and they said, hey, very interested in what you have to offer. Let's have a conversation. Well, that's reached. You have reached them. You've had 1+ conversations with a prospective client. Now, the idea here is this is really a parking spot for the part of the process where you've contacted them. They've reached back out, said they're interested. Maybe you sent them a booking link for a clarity call, free consultation, or discovery call. The first major part of the sales process for engaging with a client. So let's say you have that discovery call and things go well and you qualify them. Let's use a qualification framework like BANT. I actually have this definition here for BANT. So if you want to check out BANT more, there's actually a lot on it, but it's just a popular qualification method. Stands for budget, authority, need, and timeline. And the idea here is once you've reached somebody, you have them marked as reached, and they're in this status in the leads module when you're having your consultation. And then what you do is you go through and make sure that they have the budget, they can afford what you're offering. You make sure that they are authorized to sign the proposal or whatever agreement you're going to send over to them. You need to qualify them to make sure that they actually need what you are offering and that you can make sure that your offering can be delivered in a certain time frame. That's what the T stands for in BANT. So that's the reached status inside of leads. And by that point, if they are qualified, if they check the box on everything, then you can move them over to qualified. Ignore that ugly arrow. Here we go. And you may have other qualification type criteria, and I would encourage you to document that so that it's crystal clear to your reps what should enter the pipeline. Because once you convert a lead over to a deal, that's when you get into messing with your close ratio. And some of you might not be overly concerned about close ratio, but it's something to be aware of. So the big thing that you want to take away from this is, hey, when you have that initial conversation, at least at first, you want to manually mark that as reached. And then once you have that call and you have qualified them using BANT or another framework, you can mark them as qualified. Excuse me. So finally, on the lead status side, we have rejected. And rejected simply means that it's not a real lead. It's a junked lead. And you know what that means? Maybe a bot filled out a form, whatever it might be. I actually have a lot of automations for my clients in my own system that if someone fills out a form and their email is invalid, I automatically use 0 bounce to validate and mark them rejected because I just don't want to worry about it. I don't want to do it manually. That's a pretty simple automation to set up. It doesn't take too long. So it's something you can look into. All right, let's move over to a deal. And if you aren't aware of how Zoho CRM is designed to be used, this is really critical because a lead is an unqualified opportunity to do business with someone. It's like the starting place and the dumping ground for potential opportunities to do business or to offer someone something from your organization if you're not a business. Now, a deal is a qualified opportunity. So the leads and deals module effectively represent the entire customer journey from lead in to deal closed won. And what we want to do here in deals is make sure that there are proper stages that actually represent your sales process. So first we have qualified. Those are leads that have been assessed and deemed likely to become customers. These leads meet specific criteria such as BANT, and we call this a sales qualified lead, but we'll just call it a pipeline ready deal. Same thing, People have a million definitions for SQL, SAL, pipeline ready deal, marketing qualified lead. There's so many definitions. This is the one we're going to go by in this document. If you need to tweak this, this is the magic. You can make a copy. You can tweak it to fit the definitions in your organization. But as far as Zoho is concerned, a lead is not a qualified opportunity. That's what a deal is. And the system is set up to function in that way. So in the leads module, there's conversion mapping. So from the lead, once it's converted, it can potentially become a deal, a account, and a contact. And then it will string all those objects or records together so that you don't have to. So you're going to want to make sure that you use the system the way that I'm showing you, because if you're like, no, a lead is a qualified opportunity, that's not what Zoho is designed to do. So I don't recommend you work against the system. I recommend you work with the system in the way that it has designed certain modules to work. Alrighty, so we've got qualification on one hand here, and the trigger point here is on lead conversion. So once you qualify, you bring that over to a deal. Now, again, this doesn't have to be linear in that you don't have to have this, a deal is qualified first, and then market needs analysis, and then you create a quote, and then you send a proposal. You could have that conversation. Someone could be really excited about moving forward with you, and you could just mark it as proposal. The longer and more complex your sales process is, the more stages you will need, but I don't recommend you go anywhere over 7 and anything below 4 stages. Anything below 4 doesn't give you enough insight as to what's going on in your pipeline. Anything above 7 is just unmanageable. So that's the best practice there. So that is qualified, then needs analysis. So in this stage, the sales team works closely with the prospect to understand their specific needs, challenges, and requirements. This is like if you set up a second call. So you have that first discovery call, and it's like 15, 30 minutes, and it's really just to say, hey, are we even a good fit for each other? That next call is, let's dive deeper into your needs. Let's document them so that off call, we can design a solution and a plan for your organization, and then you can prepare for your pitch or your proposal. So that's what needs analysis is. Some of you might have 1 to 2 call closes, and you don't really need this status or this stage, but this is available to you just so you can know what a full-fledged pipeline stage system looks like, and then you can tweak things as you go. So I added this in as quote, and this is the quotes module, but it's a part of the deals process. So after needs analysis, you can put together a quote in the system, and you can just send off that quote. It's not necessarily a deal stage, but I think it's important to understand, since you're going to be implementing Zoho CRM, how Zoho CRM works and what this process looks like step by step. So you'll send out that quote. And in addition to that, if you want to send a line by line breakdown of what someone's purchasing, you send over a quote. And then the proposal is the agreement, right? So it's like the contract, plus if there's anything else you like to add in the proposal, great, you can send that over as well. And so you have a quote to send over the breakdown. And the idea here is potentially you could send over like multiple quotes, right? If you're going back and forth after the needs analysis, send over an initial quote. They're like, actually, we want to tweak X, Y, Z. You don't want to keep creating proposals. You'll just create a couple quotes. Once they agree on a quote, then you can finalize that documentation through a proposal and then send it over. So that's the idea here. This is, again, displaying like the most complex version of how to use Zoho, and you can tweak it or adjust things as needed if you have a more simplified sales process, which oftentimes most people do, but I want to show you everything so that you can get an idea of what Zoho is capable of doing. All right, then you've got a proposal. So once someone has agreed on a quote, or if you just want to go directly over to sending them a proposal, they're excited to get going, and what you're offering is pretty simple, you don't need a quote, then you can create a proposal using Zoho Sign. So you can see this Zoho Sign status here, and you send the proposal from the deals module via a mail merge document. And I go over that process at a high level in the last section, in the demonstration section of this video, if you want to check that out. So that is the proposal, the negotiation. This is just everything after you send over the proposal. So you send over the proposal, you send them an email and say, hey, did you receive the proposal? Everything after that is a negotiation. Whether it's like you two sitting down at a table and you're going back and forth, like we traditionally see negotiations happening, or if it's just over email, hey, can we make these adjustments? We don't agree with these terms. We don't want this. That's all negotiation. So once you send over the proposal and they confirm that they've received it, move it over to negotiation. You can do that automatically, or you can do it manually. I don't think you should automate everything. I think you should do things manually at first, find a best practice, see an opportunity for automation, and then build automations over time. You don't need to have a fully automated system. Oftentimes, it's just too rigid to use and it gets confusing. So be aware of that. That is the negotiation stage in the deals module. So we talked about Zoho Sign, sending that contract out or proposal out for signature, which is really nice. You don't have to pay for DocuSign or Proposify or other proposal builders. You can just use Zoho Sign there, and it is a perfect tool 99% of the time. You have Zoho Books. So if someone purchases something from you or they sign the proposal, then you can create a sales order inside of Zoho Books, and you actually create from the quote, you can create the sales order, and that's what I'd recommend that you do. There's a lot of overlap between Zoho CRM and Zoho Books. If you're planning on using Zoho Books, or maybe you're using QuickBooks or another bookkeeping software, make sure that from the quote, you create the sales order. That's not an out-of-box functionality, but it is a best practice. So you'll just have a piece of code that basically takes all the line items from the quote, pushes it over to a sales order. Now, the reason you want to do it from a sales order is a sales order can be broken up into multiple invoices. So a lot of the times that people are offering some kind of service or product, they have multiple payment installments. And so a sales order allows you to do that. It's a general best practice for bookkeeping in general, but you have multiple invoices that can be associated to the master record, which is a sales order. In addition to that, if you need to acquire goods after you've sold something, you can create a purchase order and associate that to a sales order. And that can initially happen via custom function, which is really, really helpful. All right, we've reached the end of the pipeline, right? And when I say pipeline, for clarity, I'm talking about the deals module here. So the lead, sometimes when people say pipeline, they're referring to leads. But really, when people are saying pipeline, they're saying everything after qualification, right? Legitimate opportunities to do business with someone. All right, so here we have the closed won and closed lost stage at the end of the pipeline. So the agreement or contract has been signed. Some people do it after payments collected. I would not recommend that. Once someone has signed, that's committed revenue. Let's mark it closed won for sales. So signed contract or agreement. Once you get that notification, hey, it's been signed, mark it closed won. Congratulations, you have a closed won deal. That's awesome. Excellent. So we have closed lost. This is the stage that is the opposite, right? If someone chooses not to progress with the sale, then you mark it closed won. And you can put different reasons. I wouldn't recommend, however, that you have different stages for different reasons for why they're closed lost. So I'll see in a lot of systems when I go in initially, I'll have closed lost, and then they'll have closed lost to competition, closed lost budget, and all the reasons. Don't do that. Just have one closed lost stage, and then you can have a field for closed lost reason why. And then you can mark all the reasons why someone was closed lost, and then you can use that report later on to further train your sales team or to better your offering so that you can close more deals instead of lose them. So that's the closed loss stage here. All right, we're going to plow forward with contact. So these are the different stages or statuses that you can use for a contact. And quick note here, I encourage you to use a Kanban view when you're looking at any of these modules at a high level. I just find it's not super helpful to jump in and use the list view unless I'm zooming into a specific status or stage or criteria for a list. So at a high level, you want to view your system from left to right in a Kanban view. That's the most helpful way to do it. All right, so you got a prospect. That means they've entered the pipeline, but they haven't signed. And then you have a customer, which is contacts associated to at least one closed won deal, or a contact associated to at least one closed won deal, or associated to an account with a closed won deal. So you have other here, which just means it's a contact that is neither a prospect or customer. And you might be thinking, well, hey, what about prospective clients that didn't enter the pipeline and they never signed? Well, that's a lead. So you don't have to worry too much about that. That is accounted for in this definition for contact. So essentially you can, at first, you may want to automate this, but you can honestly keep it manual and it's not a huge deal. Once a closed won once an opportunity is marked closed won, you can go to the associated account via automation and then find all the related contacts and mark them all as customer if you would like to. Now, if they don't fit in prospect or customer, you can add other stages here, but to keep it simple, you can just mark as other, and then you can have a column for how they're associated with your organization. A contact represents a person that is in some way associated with your organization, whether it be a prospect, customer, or other. Now we're going to move over to accounts. So for those of you who are doing account-based marketing, you may have been watching this video so far and thinking to yourself, well, how does this apply to me? I don't do traditional marketing, right? I don't have these mass communications, this organic marketing that's going out. And then I'm not feeding people over to a landing page and having people fill out a form. I'm being I'm like a sniper. I have very specific targets. I have those targeted list of accounts, and then I go for those logos. Well, that's account-based marketing, and we can accommodate for account-based marketing inside of Zoho. In fact, we can set it up pretty well with these stages that I'm about to show you. So you've got target, and target is an account that is being targeted for marketing and sales. We'll do and or sales. So the idea here is the account is added to the system manually or automatically for marketing communications or as a holding place for a sales representative. So if you have let's say you have an offering for large companies and you want to go for the Fortune 1000 or Fortune 500, well, awesome. That's not a lot of accounts. So initially you would load the Fortune 1000 or the Fortune 500 into Target. That's where you would initially add them to the stage. That's the first. Again, we're working our way from left to right. From there, as a rep, you will mark the ones that you're going to work. More likely than not, if you're targeting 500 companies or 1,000 companies, you're not going to work them all at the same time. So you will do some analysis on your side to decide on what's going to be the most impactful accounts to go for, and then you start to go for them. And that's working. Again, this is where you can use an outreach cadence to define what does it mean to actually work an account? What am I going to do? And the idea here as well is when you're doing account-based marketing, you don't want to use the leads module, because when you do account-based marketing, it's more like a land and expand sales process. So you determine the account you're going to go for, you get an initial contact, and that initial contact is usually not the authorized person that you want. So you'll have them suggest another person at the organization you can discuss until you get to the person that you need to have to sign the contract. And so you'll build a list of stakeholders for an organization, and you want to list all those accounts under an account, all those contacts under an account, and you can't do that in leads. So you want to make sure you're doing it in the accounts module. So you can think about it as the accounts module here, the way we're using it for account-based marketing, is pretty much like we're using the leads. It's the stages before they enter the pipeline. At least target and working is. And so once you reach out to multiple people in the organization, you've worked the account and you've got a couple of contacts. Once they are interested in an opportunity and you've qualified them, right? Maybe use BANT or another framework, then you can mark it as selling. And selling just means an account that has an active associated open deal. And then if you have an account that has a deal that's been marked closed lost, that's considered a win back. Just because you've lost that single opportunity doesn't mean there's no opportunities in the future with that account. So you just mark it as a win back. And essentially this notifies marketing that, hey, we want to make sure that these people are in a nurture series. So you probably noticed here, I've got segmentation list. This is for marketing, newsletter, and nurture series. They're still going to receive communication, just not dedicated sales attention. So it's the best way to organize that. Then you've got customer. So if you have an account with an associated closed won deal, you can automatically mark your account as customer. And then you've got cold. So an account that needs further automated nurturing, you can think of cold as you can think of recycled. If you go through your whole working cadence here and you have 10 different interactions that you're committed to making every time that you're working an account and they are unresponsive, you can just mark them as cold. And again, they'll enter a newsletter and nurture series. So from left to right, that is how you can use Zoho to best manage your customer journey. Now we're going to go over the launch plan, and the launch plan is the documentation that represents what you're going to do at a high level to make sure that your Zoho implementation is successful. So the way that you want to document it is like this. It is very helpful to see at a high level how you're going to do this day over day within a specific month. I don't recommend you do this multi-month crazy documentation plan. Just say, hey, ideally, these are the events that have to occur in order for us to have a successful Zoho implementation. We need to have a demonstration. We need to make sure we have documentation. We need to make sure that we customize the system. Pretty much everything included in this video as far as strategy, with a couple additions. So let's go through it together. This is an ideal version. So if you look through this and you're like, there's no way I can make this data export in a day on April 3rd. If I chose to do this in April, there's no way I could just do it in one day. Well, you're probably right. You can do it in one day, but this is the ideal, right? You may be an organization with 50 to 500 employees or people at the organization. You may be an organization of one. You may be a one-man band. So you could do a data export in one day if you were just one person with a spreadsheet bringing it into Zoho. So keep that in mind as we go through this. This is the ideal. This is a template, so you can tweak this over time. All right, so Monday, April 1st, demonstration. So the idea here is that you get a demonstration from an expert like myself. Just go to the demonstration part of this video. Make sure you get a proper demonstration that you clearly understand what Zoho is capable of doing. That is really important. That essentially helps you keep the end in mind as you go through the entire implementation process. You can always refer back to this if there's things that are interesting to you or if you want to be inspired for what Zoho can do. Then you have April 2nd, the Tuesday, documentation, customization, light testing. Honestly, the documentation and customization sections, this should be easy because I'm giving you documentation. So as long as you're not drastically changing the documentation, you can make a copy and then customize your system in a day. That should not be beyond you. I'm going to show you exactly how to do the customization in this video in a later section. Then we've got light testing. You want to make sure that you go through the system and you move the records from left to right across the Kanban view after customization, because later you are going to add users to get trained in the system and to test the system. So you want to do some light testing initially just so that they don't jump in there and everything's, unusable for even testing. The next day you can do your data export. And this is where the implementation can go from taking a couple days to a couple months. Is how much data are you looking to bring over? And the really critical concept I want to get across to you here is think minimum viable. What is the minimum amount of data that you need in order to get started with Zoho? Don't go for every possible piece of data and data point in your system. More likely than not, because you're anxious, you're going to try to grab more data than you need. Just bring over the data that you need. You can bring over other data later. And just to ease your conscience, if you're moving off of another system and you're at the end of your contract for that system, export everything, import it to Zoho Analytics as a database, and then just bring over from that database everything you need for a working CRM system. That way you have all the data on hand, but you don't slow down the process of an implementation. So when you bring data into Zoho CRM, think minimum viable. If you want to collect all the data from a huge system where you've collected tons of data, bring it into Zoho Analytics, and then bring over a section of that data, the minimum viable part of the data, into Zoho CRM. When I'm talking minimum viable, honestly, if you bring over leads, deals, contacts, accounts, and products, then you're good to go. You can do 99% of what you need from a first version of Zoho. Don't go crazy thinking you got to do this big bang implementation. That's what leads to failure. All right, so that is enough on data export. And then you've got your sample migration. So one day you want to export, make sure the data is normalized. We're going to go over that process in a later section of this video. And then the sample migration. So the idea with the sample migration is you don't want to initially bring all of your data over. You just want to bring a small sample, maybe like 10 to 100 records per object or record that you're looking to have represented in Zoho for testing. And this just gives you what the last situation you want to have happen in your organization when you do a Zoho implementation is when you do a full migration, it's your first time ever migrating data because you are going to mess up at that point. So sample migration is like a test run and it's two birds, one stone. When you do a sample migration, you get data in there for user testing, which I'm going to go over, and you do a round with yourself so that when you mess up, you're like, I need to be aware of this when I do my full migration. So that's the purpose of a sample migration, just get some of the data in there. All right, so for Friday, in this example launch plan, you can add users to Zoho and then get team training. So you can notify your users and say, hey, everyone's been added to Zoho for team training and testing. And then you'll give them access to team training. I have a Zoho CRM in-depth training on my YouTube channel. And so if you want to send that to everyone on your team, it's 2 hours long. It's everything that someone needs to go from a absolute beginner in Zoho to a power user in Zoho. So you can just send them that. It's completely free. Or you can buy a team training program. It's whatever works best for you and how dedicated you want resources to helping your team get trained inside of Zoho. So again, that Friday, add users to Zoho, get team training. From there, you want to make sure that your team has a couple of days to get trained and use the system. It's much better to go with this just-in-time training than just-in-case training. So what you don't want to do is train your whole team, give them training, but they're watching a video on how to use a system they don't have access to. That's called just-in-case. What's going to sink in is just-in-time. So if they're like, okay, we're going to use the system at the end of the month. I have access to the system now. It hasn't gone live yet, but I just got training. They're much more incentivized to use the training, and they'll actually go through the training faster, and it will mean more to them. So don't do this preemptive training. Have a week where you give them training and say, hey, we're planning on launching on April 22nd. So we're going to give you 5 days to train here and test and give us some feedback. So you're going to have your team trained for 5 days, and that just gives some wiggle room just in case some people have other things that they're doing. I know dedicating 2 hours in a single day isn't realistic oftentimes. So you just send over a video, either my YouTube training video, or if you find a team training that you like better, just make sure they're an authorized partner and they're a legitimate expert. Send them over training, give them 5 days to complete it. All right. Then you have on April 15th testing. So this is, you do light testing before you bring everyone to the system, and then you do real testing because you're like, hey, is this system ready to go? We're going to do a system check. We're going to make sure that everything is ready to go. So you want to make sure that you have a testing day where you can just go through that, and you could give yourself multiple days to test if you really wanted to. That's not a problem. Okay, so the important thing to get across here too for the final migration before implementation is this. So for a full migration, you want to do it the day before you go live. And what I suggest to give yourself the most breathing room is you do the migration at the end of the day of the least operationally heavy day, because you don't want to do a migration during a really busy season because you want to lower the risk of potentially making a mistake and then ruining your operations for your organization, which can totally happen if you migrate wrong. So you want to make sure that you give yourself some wiggle room. So what I typically recommend for my clients is, hey, if Friday at the end of the day of Friday is not a busy day for you, then do your full migration at the end of the day on Friday. This will leave the least amount of delta records to bring over later. The delta is the period between when you actually export your data for the full migration and when you actually execute the full migration, because more likely than not, unless you do your full export at 4:59 and 5 o'clock, maybe there's some people who have changed and updated records from there. So you just want to reduce the amount of delta records there. So you'll do that on a Friday, and then you'll make sure you first do a full export. We're going to do it like this. Actually, we'll do full export. We'll do full data export, and then full migration the same day. And you'll want to dedicate a few hours to that. That's going to take some time. And the nice thing is, by this time, you've already done it, right? You've already done your data export. You've already done a sample migration. So this should not be new to you at this point. And then finally, on that Monday, you will actually launch. You'll send out an email to your team. You'll say, hey, the system's ready to go. There's data in it. Make sure that you cut over. And you're going to want to send these communications all throughout the implementation of when the next stage is happening, and then the overall plan and where you're at in the plan. But this document gives you the best high-level understanding of the different events that need to occur before you can actually launch, and actually when they will occur in a given month or period of time. All right, I know this is a lot and I don't want to drown you in documentation, but those two documents, the launch plan and the journey map, are really critical. You want to make sure that you've got that dialed in. And I think it's a quote from Eisenhower where he says something to the effect of, I've noticed when I go into battle, plans, like nothing goes according to plans, but planning itself is indispensable. It's something like that. And I like that quote because things won't go according to your launch plan and your journey map won't be perfect, but that preparation brings much needed clarity to the implementation and the usage of Zoho down the line. So you want to make sure that you do your homework. Do not go into an implementation blind, especially your CRM. Your CRM is the heart of your tech stack. You want to be very intentional with how you set these things up. Don't just wing it. I have so many clients that are like, we're just going to go for it. I'm like, make sure you have at least these two documents and you're following some kind of strategy instead of just sending it. Because if you do that, you are going to get so many angry users who don't want to use the system. So I just wanted to, I can't stress enough how important it is to make those two documents. Now we're going to go into some optional documentation that you don't have to create, but it is extremely useful and it's good to be aware of. And the reason I'm going over this stuff is to I feel like I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't go over this. So that's why I want to make you aware of these different documents. So if you're going to make a copy of this, you might as well know what's inside of the document. So first and foremost, Zoho CRM implementation strategy. This is what we've already talked about, right? Like this whole video is built around this system. And you'll notice testing is in here. Well, we go over testing now so that you can use it in your launch plan. That's really part of the launch. All right, so we've also got the UTM builder. Now, the critical thing to understand here is if you are in marketing, every time you have a call to action anywhere, whether it's in your LinkedIn bio or your YouTube video or in your Yelp ad, every time you're calling someone to action, to go to a landing page, you want to make sure that you have UTM parameters associated with that link. There's no way currently to do that automatically. You have to do it manually. What I mean by that is there's no software to just have your UTMs automatically generated for every platform and then distributed to every platform. You have to do it. And so you have really two options. Number one, you can go throughout the internet and there's like Google's UTM builder. Well, cool. If you do it in Google's UTM builder, it doesn't keep track of all the call to actions that you have. So it's good to have this document to keep track of all the call to actions that you've call to action links that you've generated over time. So I just use a spreadsheet. The nice thing about this is all you have to do as a part of this spreadsheet is fill in the gaps. So for example, if this was my landing page, right, drewbrockbank.com at drewbrockbank.com/free consultation. Awesome. This form actually grabs UTM parameters. So what I can do is I can fill out the UTM parameters. So let's say for some reason I was running a Yelp ad. I would do Yelp, I do paid, I would do Yelp, I do %20 general, and then none. And then for content, I'll just put none. All right, so the nice thing about this is you'll notice here's UTM source, Yelp, UTM medium, paid, UTM campaign, Yelp general, UTM term, none. And then the reason I've got the %20 is you can have a space inside of a URL. So if you use %20, it will convert over to a space later. But yeah, that's how you essentially build this is you have your landing page and then you fill in your source, medium, campaign, term, content, and then it will create the URL with UTM parameters for you. Then you can just copy this, go to wherever you have your call to action, you can paste it. And so this isn't going to automatically distribute it for you. It's just a good way to keep record of what call to action links you built over time. That's the idea of the UTM builder section here. Okay, Zoho lead scoring. Lead scoring is one of those things that is extremely confusing, and to put it in context, and we already mentioned this briefly, when you are a marketer or you are doing marketing activities, you want to automate the process as much as you can as far as saying that these people are legitimate. And you need to determine beforehand how you will consider a opportunity legitimate enough for sales to give it some attention. And that's where lead scoring comes in. So don't start from scratch. Just use what I have here to get started, and you can tweak it as you go. So you've got information-based scoring and behavior-based scoring. These are the two general buckets for lead scoring. Now, information-based scoring is like this. If you have a persona, an avatar, or an ideal customer profile, that is information-based scoring. It's what do we know about this person and how much weight do we give this to determine if they're legitimate. So for example, you can have persona or role. If they are a marketing leader and you provide marketing software, boom, you want to give them 25 points. If you only serve large companies and they have 2 employees, you don't want to give them points. So you just want to make sure that they are ideal from an information-based standpoint, right? So when they fill out the form, they give you information, you can assign them points. If you want to go to Zoho Campaigns lead scoring, I have a link to that here, so you can just jump into it and it will go more in depth on how to tactically set this up. But I just want to mention to you, since right now we're just going to go over documentation. All right, then you have behavior-based scoring. So this is another way to score. Essentially what you're saying is, hey, if people open 50 emails that we send and they click on every single link, they are warmer than someone who has never opened an email. And so we want to give them some kind of points to let the sales team know that they are somewhat legitimate for an opportunity. So you also have submissions. If they fill out a form, you can essentially give them 100 points and then breach the lead score. And this is important to note too. When you're lead scoring, you need to determine at what point do you have enough points to consider them a marketing qualified lead. Like, let's be objective. Let's not be subjective about it and leave it up to feelings. At what point are we going to bring them over to marketing qualified lead? And most organizations go at 100 points. And then I recommend you go through 100 points, especially with the way Zoho is set up. And once that's breached, that moves over to marketing qualified lead. So you just want to make sure you have it documented beforehand so you can use this as a master doc when you actually go to build out lead scoring. All right, so two quick tabs here left in the spreadsheet. So number one, marketing segmentation list. So you want to make sure that you have your, like we were seeing here for journey map, there's different segmentation lists at the bottom. You just want to make sure there's definitions for what the purpose is behind this and why you're creating them. It's really helpful to create this documentation beforehand because when you actually go to create the segments, you're going to think to yourself, why am I creating this segment? Who cares? Like, is this actually going to be helpful? So make the case for why you're making the segment beforehand. Newsletter, nurture series, customer success, customer. Make all those segments beforehand in a document before you go into the system and start playing around with it. And then you just end up becoming aimless if you don't have a plan beforehand. All right, now you've got definitions. So I've got some quick definitions in here. I'll try to update this as I have questions from clients or as I have other definitions that I feel like are helpful for training. That way we can all keep each other up to date on what things mean inside of Zoho. But lead, deal, quote, everything I mentioned in earlier sections of this video, there's different terms and then their definitions, their corresponding definitions that you can go through as well. So that is the remaining documentation inside of the journey map document. Now we're going to move into customization, and really the whole gist of customization is that we put your process into the software because oftentimes many organizations use the software to design their processes. That is completely backwards. That's not what you want to do at all. You want to make sure that first off, you have a documented, shared understanding of what your processes are just as a V1. If you need to, you can just steal mine right here. You can make a copy of the journey map below. Now, once you have this all documented, how do you actually go about putting it into the system? And if we look here, we've got the leads module and it's represented statuses here. How do we actually throw that into the leads module inside of Zoho CRM? Well, it's actually fairly straightforward. This isn't very advanced, but it's extremely important and critical. And that's why if you watched earlier sections and I had my full-on launch plan, you can do the documentation and customization phases or stages in the same day because it's not too time intensive and thankfully it's not too complicated. So how we actually go about customizing the Kanban stages here is first off, we go over to settings and then we go over to modules and fields. And then from here, we'll go to the corresponding module. Now, the way that we can know which module to go to is because we have it listed here in our documentation. So in this case, we'll go over to the leads module and we will go over to the standard layout. And then from here, we're going to go over to lead status. I'm going to go ahead and edit the properties here. And keep in mind, when you use a Kanban view in any module, you've got to build it on top of a pick list. That's just a drop-down menu of options. It's a field that gives you options instead of free range to enter whatever you want. So make sure that you pick for any Kanban view, make sure you're using a pick list. And when you're using leads, make sure to use lead statuses. When you use deals, use deal stages because those are out of the box ready to go for you. All right, so now what we can do is we can open this up and we can see all the various options right here. And so what we'll want to do is we'll just copy these over. You can see I've already have them copied over, but you'd go over here, you just copy it in. And then I like to put a quick definition here just so people know very quickly what this is all about. So they don't look at a subscriber and think, what does that mean? They can go over to lead and see marketing ready. They can go to subscriber and see raw lead and then get an idea of what's going on in this status and what it actually means. So that's how you would customize it for the leads module inside of Zoho CRM. Now, thankfully, the process that I just showed you is the same for the deals module and any other module inside of Zoho CRM, except for one thing. If you do this outside of leads and deals, and really you should just be doing it for leads, deals, accounts, and contacts. For accounts and contacts, there's not going to be a pick list out of the box ready to go for you. So what you're going to have to do in those modules is you're going to have to jump into them. And we'll do that together here. Let's jump out, go over to contacts. We'll go over to this layout. And then we'll go over to pick list. And we'll add a pick list here. And from here, we would add contact status. Or we could say stage, whichever one you want. And then you would add the various statuses or stages that you have listed in your document: prospect, customer, other. And it's totally fine to initially have these statuses exist or stages exist without any automation. And then as you begin to use the system more and more, you can begin adding automation strategically to the system instead of trying to automate everything at first, because it's okay just to have the organization and the skeleton before you move into the system. You don't have to have everything automated and integrated right off the bat. So don't worry too much about that. I know it's going to give you a bit of anxiety to think about that. And you're like, no, we need a more robust system. You don't. You can start with a simple working system with basic customization, and you can move forward from there. So you can see here, I already have a pick list that I've added for contact type, I believe. Let's check this out. Yep, you can see I have this contact type for customer, prospect, evangelist, partner. So what you do from here in order to actually visualize that pick list as a Kanban view is you go to the corresponding module, and then you go over to the different view options, the different list view options. You've got traditional list view, Kanban, custom list tile, table. When you're zooming out or initially jumping into a module, you want to use a Kanban view so that you can see your data in relation to a process. And then when you zoom into information, you can use a list view, and then you can get more granular with a custom view and with a filter. All right, so from here, how you actually change or modify or configure the Kanban view is you go over to the gear icon here after selecting Kanban view, and then you can name the Kanban view and then select the pick list field that you want to build the Kanban view on top of. Then you need to select an aggregate, and so you can just do annual revenue, cost per click, anything that you want to roll up and then display on the top of the column for the Kanban view. And then you can set a header style. I just like to do monocolor. I don't go crazy with colors here. And then for the leads module specifically, I just like lead name, company, email, lead source. You can choose for yourself the critical information for your organization, what you want to actually see on the card, because what you're displaying here is you're not saying, hey, these are the fields that I want available in the record. You're saying these are the fields that I want to see right on top of the record in the Kanban view via the card display. So that's how you actually build the Kanban view there. So the critical things to take away from here is make sure you have the documentation first. You go into modules and fields, you customize the layout, and make sure that you have your statuses and stages in the pick list field that you're going to build the Kanban view on top of. And then once you've done that, you can go back into the module. You can jump in here, make sure that the Kanban view is selected, go into settings, and then you can configure that view for yourself. Again, you don't want to worry too much about automating and integrating everything. Go ahead and just make sure you have a simple working system of Zoho. Make sure you go in here and have the Kanban view, and you are good to go for basic customization for a simple working system. So what we just went over is high-level customization. Now we're going to transition into detailed customization, which is field customization. And this is critical to do typically after a sample migration, but you can be proactive about this. You can determine, hey, this data is critical for us to capture before we can use the system. So you can just make a list of all the fields that you need for your leads module, for your deals module, for contacts, and for accounts. You can determine proactively what data you need to capture in the system. You can list it all out. And then we're going to go over all of the different field options that you have so that you can make that data capture available via a field on a layout inside of Zoho CRM. So the essential thing to understand here is if you're going to use Zoho to collect data, you need to have fields available for that data. So let's go into settings here and talk about how to actually tactically customize the layouts inside of Zoho CRM. So let's start with the leads module, and we're going to go over all the different field options that you have here, because at first glance, it can be kind of confusing, but you'll notice as we go through each of these together that they're actually pretty straightforward. So single line is alphanumeric, and essentially it's a single line of text. It's open entry. So if I put a single line text on the layout, I'm able to type in pretty much whatever I want, but there is a character limit. Multi-line expands that character limit. So same thing as single line. I just have multiple lines of alphanumeric text that I can use. Now, the cool thing that was just announced by Zoho is multi-line now supports rich text. So you can bold, make italics, anything you do with a typical rich text editor that you're used to with things like Zoho Docs or Google Docs, you can now do inside of a multi-line field as well, which is really cool. All right, you've got email, which is exactly how it's labeled. It allows you to throw in an email address. You've got phone number, pretty straightforward and self-explanatory there as well. Then you've got pick list. A pick list just means you get a drop down of those options and you can customize which options are available. Then you've got multi-select pick list. If you put down a multi-select pick list, it's the same as pick list, but a pick list, you can only choose one option. A multi-select pick list, you can choose as many as you'd like. Then you've got date, which just shows a date and time, gets a little more granular for you. So if you want a date and a date time filter, those are available for you. You've got number. It doesn't support alphanumeric, which is not letters and numbers, just numbers are available in this field. Pretty self-explanatory. Got auto number, generates a number for you without you having to do anything. So it essentially serves as a unique identifier. But the important thing to understand is any record here already has a alphanumeric or a unique identifier here. So you don't have to worry too much about putting an auto number. Those really already exist for you. All right, so you've got currency, which allows you to throw in an amount of money in different currencies depending on the currency management that you use. Then you've got decimal, which allows you a number with decimal places. You've got percent, pretty self-explanatory there. Long integer is just a long number with multiple decimal spaces. You've got checkbox, which is just a binary, so either yes or no, something is or isn't something. Then you've got URL, pretty self-explanatory there. You can just link to a page, and then lookup. So the important thing to understand about a lookup field is it creates relationships between records. So when you use a relational database, and the whole idea behind a relational database is you don't just collect information on one sheet like you would in a spreadsheet. You spread things out and you normalize the data, and then you show the relationships between different objects. When I say objects, I just mean real things in real life that are represented digitally. And so a lead, for example, is an object that represents something in real life, which is a unqualified opportunity to do business with someone. A deal represents a thing in real life as well. A qualified opportunity to do business with someone. An account represents an organization, a thing in real life. So these are just digital representations of real things. And with lookup fields, you can essentially say, hey, this contact, this person in my database, they are associated with this organization. They work for this organization. And the issue with storing organization data on a contact specifically, which kind of reiterates the whole concept of relational database to begin with, is if you store, let's say you have 10 contacts associated to one organization, and on each contact, it had the organization name, and you change the organization on 2 of the 10 contacts. Well, that would ruin the entire database. You wouldn't be able to run proper reports because there wouldn't be a unique identifier for those different contacts. And you would essentially have a data crisis if you didn't have a relational database with proper data normalization. So the reason I bring all this up is oftentimes people go to implement Zoho and they look at these records and like, this is really confusing. Let's just have one record. You can't have one record. It's impossible. You have to break those records up if you want proper reporting and if you want to be able to use Zoho in the best way possible. So keep that in mind. Now, that's a backdrop to really just say, hey, the lookup field essentially creates a parent-child relationship. A parent looks down to other records. So if we go to Ariana Gibson, for example, all the information here, these are essentially child records. So if I go over to open activities, this activity looks up to Ariana. And so Ariana is the master record here. However, if I was to go into a contact and create Ariana Gibson as a contact and then looked up to demo company 1, Ariana would then be the child record and the demo company 1 would then be the parent record. So the big takeaway here is you're creating relationships with lookup fields and you want to make sure that you have a proper entity relationship diagram, an object relationship diagram before you go about creating these relationships. But most of the relationships you need here are actually already out of the box, so you don't have to worry too much about this unless you're aware of some data requirement where there needs to be some kind of relationship. So just be aware of that. All right, you've got formula field. This just allows you to use different functions within a field and allows you to essentially all these operators here. You can add, subtract, multiply different data in that object together to give you a new value. So a use case there, just to color that in, would be something that I do with my clients all the time, which is when a form is submitted, like a contact the sales team form, we grab that email, we take it over to zero bounce, and then we get the domain age in days. And that's helpful, but we want to see it in years. I mean, you seeing 6,000 days, that's not super helpful for you. But if you see that divided by 365 and see the amount of years, that helps you to see how established an organization possibly is. They've been around for 10 years versus 2 days. That's a huge difference. So it's helpful to see how many years an organization has existed or a domain has existed. And just because a domain has existed for 20 years doesn't mean that's how old the business is, but it gives you some kind of indication as to how established the organization might be that just inquired to your business or your organization. So that's a use case for using the formula field, is dividing that by 365 so that you can get a idea of how established an organization is in years. Then you've got user. This is another lookup field. Essentially, it looks up to the users in your organization. So it's not a typical lookup field, but it essentially accomplishes the same thing. You've got file upload, which allows you to upload multiple or various documents to a single field. You've got image upload, just allows you to upload images to a field. And then you've got roll up summary. You've got multi-select lookup, which essentially allows exactly what a lookup field does, but it's a little different in that you can select multiple records. And this gets a little complicated, but essentially what a multi-select lookup does is it opens up a junction table. If you want to look into junction table and you're really nerdy and you like that stuff, you can totally get into it. But essentially a junction table is a new, if you think of a spreadsheet, it's a new tab in the spreadsheet. And every time you create a relationship with a multi-lookup, it adds a record to the junction table, which is essentially a connector table to different objects, and it will store unique information for that relationship. So to bring that down to a real use case, if you had a consultant associated with multiple different organizations, but they worked for an organization, how would you show that in the system? Well, you would use a multi-select lookup to say, hey, in this junction table, we have one consultant contact that's associated with 10 different organizations. Now they're a consultant for 9 organizations, but they actually work for this consultancy, right? So that's how you would be able to represent that kind of data relationship inside of Zoho. Then you've got subform. Essentially, this allows you to put an object within an object. So a common use case for a subform, but this is out of the box, so you don't have to worry about doing this custom, is when you go about creating a quote isn't really one object, it's actually multiple objects. So you've got the quote and your different line items in a quote. That line items section is a subform where you can add multiple rows, say, hey, it's this product, this quantity, this amount, and then you can do that over and over again for a quote. That is a subform. So that's a popular use case for subform, but there's other use cases as well. And then to keep things organized, you can add a news section. So you can see associated records, lead forward fields, lead information. These are all various sections inside of Zoho just to keep it organized so that when I actually go to use a record, I can see things clearly here and it's not super confusing. So that's just an organization thing. You've got unused items. Anytime you remove a field, it's not actually removing data. It actually just goes into unused fields. When you want to get worried about things is if you actually remove the field when it's an unused field, then it's really gone. All right, so that is the basics for field customization. Now I'm going to take a step back because you don't need to do this right now. I would actually suggest that after you do a sample migration, which we're going to go over that more in depth when we go over launch plan, or if you watch the documentation section of this video, then I mentioned this as well. So when you do a sample migration, you're bringing data from another system over into Zoho. So what does that have to do with customization? Well, if you bring your data over and you use the migration tool to do so, then what happens is Zoho automatically adds fields for the different data points from the sample migration data set, which means you don't have to go and create those fields beforehand. The migration tool does it for you. So to save you from work, use the sample migration tool first. Go ahead and bring all those fields over. And then after you bring all those fields over, you can add additional fields as needed for data points that weren't in the sample migration data set. So in other words, don't worry too much about this now. Do your sample migration, and then you can add fields as needed. But don't worry about trying to do everything up front. That's the real danger of a Zoho implementation. What makes most of them fail is people get anxious because it's technical. They try to do way too much. You don't need an advanced system. You can't build a complex working system before you build a simple working system and adopt that first, and then you can evolve that system over time. That's Gall's law. All right, so with that is how you can do your detailed level customization inside of Zoho. Let's talk about migrating data. Now, I mentioned this earlier in this video that migrations are oftentimes the most difficult part of actually implementing Zoho, just because it gets really complicated really fast. So admittedly, I am feeling a bit lazy, and I've already done a training extensively on how to migrate data over. So this section is going to be interesting because part of it's going to be what I'm making now. Part of it's going to be a section from Z Training. And Z Training is my completely free training program that goes in depth on everything you need to know as a Zoho user to go from a beginner to a power user in Zoho. And what we're going to do is first, we're going to go over the strategy here on how to properly migrate your data over. And then I'm going to add in some clips from Z Training so that you can get the most detailed training possible, because I really just don't want to redo it. So forgive me. I know I'm being a little lazy there, but I think it will be beneficial for you to have that. All right, so let's talk strategy before we get into tactics. So first and foremost, you've got the initial sample migration. And this will be a refresher for you if you already went through the documentation section, because I actually went over this. So if you've already gone through that section and you're seeing this, you're like, oh, again, go ahead and skip through this. That's totally fine. Get to the tactical stuff. All right, so first and foremost, you got the sample migration. And the idea behind this strategy is I would hate for you to do your first migration the business day before you launch. Could you imagine that? Going for launch day, or you're on the Friday before your launch, and you have all this data you've never exported, and you're trying to bring data into the system untrained. That would be a horrible experience. We want to avoid that. So once you set a launch date, you want to schedule the sample migration well beforehand. This right here is a sample calendar, which is the necessary events for a launch. We're going to go more in depth on all of this in the launch plan, but for now, we are just going to cover the sample and full migration piece here. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to do a data export the day before, or if you want to do it all in one day, that's totally fine. This is just a sample representation of what you could do. So you'll do a data export, and you'll go into the system that you're wanting data from, and you don't want to grab all of the data. You just want to grab the data, your minimum viable amount of data. And this is where it gets really murky, because I can't tell you what your minimum viable data is. But minimum viable just means what's the least amount of data that you need to get a simple working system in Zoho. And immediately you'll get anxious and you'll be like, no, I need more, I need more. You don't. You can move your data over in phases. Just get the basics over. If that's the last year's worth of data for leads, contacts, deals, and accounts, awesome. Bring it over. Honestly, most organizations can get away with just leads, deals, contacts, accounts, and products, because then you can use quotes. So as long as you get some amount of that data over, you can bring over historical data later if you really need to reference all of that. Most organizations don't, though. So keep that in mind. You don't need all your data. You need the least amount of data in order to get started with a simple working system. There's no reason to bring over everything for an advanced system, because you can't adopt an advanced system before you get a basic system adopted in Zoho. That's according to Gall's law. All right, so that is the data export. So you want to make sure that you do the data export first. Don't bring over everything, minimum viable. And then you need to normalize your data. So that gets into tactical. We're going to go over that in a moment. But essentially, after you get the data export, it's going to be in a raw format. I'm going to teach you how to make data database ready. And then you do your sample migration, and you don't have to bring over even all of your minimum viable data. You can just bring over 10 to 100 records from each object. That way you have something to go off of for training. So the idea behind that is if you have no data in the system for training, it's just going to be kind of a useless exercise for the rest of your team when they get trained before you launch. So you want to make sure there's sample data there. And the nice thing about a sample data migration is then you go into the system, you start to test things, and you think to yourself, okay, this is actually what I thought the system was going to look like with the data from my previous system. And I'm saying system, but you may just be on a spreadsheet, right? You may just have 1,000 leads that you're bringing over to Zoho. And if that's the migration you're doing, then you are in this dream situation where it's going to be extremely easy. But some migrations are really complex. You have 30 different objects that you're trying to bring over. They have relationships connected to different objects. And that gets a little trickier than just doing a leads migration. All right, so that's the sample. And then you'll have your full migration. And the idea behind the full migration is you want to reduce the amount of delta records and changes that are going to happen between when you run the migration and the launch. So I recommend that you schedule the full migration a day in the week that's least busy. So for a lot of organizations, that's on a Friday. So you do your full data export and then a full migration on a Friday later in the day. And then you would actually launch the Monday after, or the next business day. And oftentimes that will be Monday for a lot of organizations. So the reason that you do it this way is, let's say you had done the full data export and full migration on Wednesday. Well, okay, the system you're moving away from, you're going to be making changes the next couple of days. So you'll have all of these delta records or changes to the system that won't make it into the new target system, which would be Zoho in this case. So make sure to do them back to back as far as business days are concerned. Make sure you do it later in the day, and then also communicate to your team, hey, we're moving our data over, and this is when we're going to be launching. That gets more into the launch plan, but that is the idea behind the strategy for migrating your data to Zoho. Hey everyone, in this video, we are going to talk about getting your data database ready. Now, in order to do that, we take data through a process called normalization. Normalization is just a fancy way of saying that you're getting data ready for a relational database such as Zoho. So if you're trying to migrate your data into Zoho, you need to make sure that your data is ready to go. So let me show you how to do this. So I have some dummy data here that we're going to use. Yes, I am in Zoho Sheets or in Google Sheets. And you may be thinking, Drew, why don't you use Zoho Sheets? Well, Google's productivity suite like Google Docs, Google Slides, Google Sheets, Gmail, I like those applications better in Google than I do in Zoho. And I love Zoho for what Zoho's really good at. So that is why I am in Google Sheets, just to get that out of the way. But with that, you can see the dummy data that I have. I also have a checklist here that you can reference so that when you go to do this, if you want to do it yourself, you have a checklist of what to do. So again, data normalization, getting data relational database ready, checklist. So the first thing we need to do is determine what object, the thing that's being represented digitally, that's what an object is when we talk about it in terms of development and getting data ready for Zoho. What the spreadsheet we're looking at, what does it represent? So if we go over here, the question is, we've got company data here. We've got first name, last name. So we're seeing both data for a organization and we're seeing first name, last name, email address data. So what does this actually represent? Well, you may think organization, but it is actually the contact. So what we're seeing here is contact information and then related company information. The way that we can tell is you can see there's multiple rows with company. So while parts of the object organization is being represented here, the row actually, each row here represents a contact, not necessarily a unique company. So what we need to do next, because we can check that off, it's the contact record and it's showing data from a related organization on there as well. Now we need to color each object up. So let's go through here and first name, last name, email address, title, seniority, department, phone number. That's all data related to the contact. Then we also have company and website, and the website and company can be colored differently because that represents the organization. So next checkbox here, separate each object by color in the same sheet. What we're going to do here is we're just going to make this really organized. We've got organization on the left, and we've got contact on the right. Now, again, this is going to be the contacts database inside of Zoho CRM and the accounts. And just think about this for a moment. If you have more objects than this, and oftentimes we have done migrations with dozens of objects, this process gets more and more complicated the more data and the more relations that you want to add in Zoho CRM. So that's why you want to be extremely frugal in the way you're bringing over data. Only bring over the minimum viable amount of data, the minimum amount of data that you need in order to get a simple working system started, because you can always bring over data in phases over time. Quick pro note there. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do here is separate each object by color in the same sheet. Awesome, we did that. Leave the unique ID. So for contacts, that's going to be the company name for any lookups. So what I'm saying here is I want to look up from the contacts module inside of Zoho CRM. I want that to link to the company. I don't just want the company name on the record. I want to link to the company record, the account record from the contact. So in order to do that, inside of Zoho CRM, I'm going to show you how this works. When you go to a contact and you look up to a account here, it says Elite Automation, but Zoho actually doesn't store the company name here. It's storing an ID. So what you're seeing is Elite Automation. What the system is seeing is 472553, this unique identifier. And this one's actually for the contact. So what the system's actually seeing is this ID, which is the account ID for the record. So what we need is unique identifiers. Now, quick note here, because this can get really confusing. We don't actually need this format for the identifier. Zoho will assign an identifier in place of the one that we do. So we can do whatever we want as long as it's a unique ID, and Zoho will reassign it with a ZCRM ID. So this is gonna make a lot more sense when I show it to you, but this is complicated. It gets a little bit tricky if you don't have a lot of experience with migrating data. All right, so what we wanna do here is we're just gonna leave the company, and I'm gonna throw that on the left-hand side, and we'll do it like this. I'm gonna grab company website data. We'll call this contacts. We'll move over, call this accounts. We'll paste that. And before we paste that, I'm just going to paste this as values only. Because what I was doing there, just so you know, is the websites, I was actually grabbing it from the end of the email address via formula. So I just needed to copy and paste that as values. I'm gonna bring that over to accounts. I'm gonna copy it over, paste it over. And now I can remove this. Column, bring the company over the left-hand side. Oh no, move this. And then from here, I left the UID. Awesome, give each object a new alpha numeric UID. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go to accounts, and I'm gonna bring over a account UID. That just stands for unique identifier. And what I'll do here is I'll do ABC 1, 2, 3. And you don't have to do alpha numeric because Zoho is going to reassign with just a numeric ID. But I like to do it. So you don't have to do it that way, but it's just what I do. Bring this over. And now I highlight both of these and just double click every single one of these. Oh, I forgot a very important step. So before I do that, what I need to do is I need to highlight both these columns. I'm gonna go to help and then remove duplicate rows here. And then we're just going to analyze column A, but because both of these rows are selected, it will remove the corresponding website for us. So remove duplicates, boom. So you can see 67 unique rows remain, 190 duplicate rows found and removed. So again, that what we brought over here that represented the accounts initially had a bunch of duplicates because it came over from contacts. In contacts, each row was representing a contact, not an account. So that's why we had to dedupe this database. So now you can see, or this sheet or table, and that's why we only have 67 rows remaining, which is good. We don't want duplicates because we're assigning IDs. So now with that done, I can go over here and do UID. You see 1, 2, 3, and I can do 4. Now we'll have 67 unique identifiers here. So now what we're going to do, we'll check that off, give each object a alphanumeric UID. I haven't given one to the contacts yet, but I'll do that in just a moment. And then VLOOKUP the alphanumeric UID as a lookup field. All right, so for any data that is looking up, so the accounts is looking up to the account, right? Or in other words, from the contact, I want to be able to click on the field for account and go to the account record. That's a lookup. The look down is from the account to the contacts. So when we're inside of Zoho CRM, we're inside of Elite Automation as a organization. And then here are the contacts. This is the look down. But what we're working on is that from here, we want to look up to the organization. So how we can actually do that is we go to the contact, right? And then on the contact, we want to make sure that there is a field here for account, and we are going to do a VLOOKUP. If you're not familiar with a VLOOKUP, there's a ton of resources online for you to learn them, but I'm going to show you how to do it here. And then we need to do this on accounts. Bring account over here because a VLOOKUP uses the first column as the for the search criteria match. So if I do VLOOKUP, I'm going to use Walgreens or this row as the search key. And then we are going to define the range here, which are these 3 columns. Then we just need them to be stagnant. So I'm going to use this. And then we're going to bring back the second cell in the row. So let's see, ABC 188 is Walgreens. It's ABC 123 Walgreens. So give me one moment. All right, and I just needed to throw in false here to get that. And that just means it's sorted, indicates whether the column to be searched, the first column, is sorted, in which case the closest match for the key will be returned. So with that, now that we have this defined, do this, can enter, and then we can fill it. And then you can see Walgreens is ABC 123, go over to accounts, Walgreens, ABC 123. So we've got that sorted. Now we're going to copy and paste this. We're gonna do values only. And then from here, we're just going to remove company because we're looking to the account via this unique identifier, which goes over to this table, which already has all the information that we need. I can actually move this over too because it's no longer a formula, it's just the value. So we have all the correct values there. So you can see, for example, if we just do Walgreens, every instance of Walgreens here, we have a couple contacts that are with Walgreens and it's ABC 123, ABC 123, again, ABC 123, ABC 123. So it worked correctly. And now our data is ready to go. The last thing that I can do here, if I need to, is I can just add a contact ID, and I'm actually gonna leave this, and I'll do C123, C123, 124, and then I'm gonna bring this down as well. And now I have a unique identifier for all of the contacts in this table, and I have a unique ID to look up to the account from this table. All right, so our data is ready to go. We have the different objects in their respective tables. When I say tables, I'm just talking about these tabs here. And because we have these IDs here, we can correctly associate the data when we actually bring it into Zoho. So everyone, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Hey everyone, in this video, we're actually going to take your data that we prepared in the last video, and we are actually going to use the Zoho CRM migration tool to bring that data into the CRM. Now, we're not going to use the import tool. You may be familiar with that tool. We're going to use the migration tool. It's a little different, and it allows us to do some advanced association of different tables or objects. So with that, we've got our data that we prepared in the last video that we normalized, and now we are going to go up into the gear icon here over to data administration and import. Now it says import, but this is the migration tool. So I'm going to real quickly jump in here, and we're going to go back and then to other CRM, and then we're going to do sheets. And then again, we just want to go to this section here, other CRM, so that we can use what we prepared in sheets. But you are in luck if you are using any of these other CRMs, because there is a much easier way for you to migrate your data. But we're going to do this because in most cases, we have to go through sheets to normalize data and to clean it up. And I'm going to go to browse files, and you'll see my randomly generated accounts and randomly generated contacts. I'm gonna select that, browse for another file, we'll get accounts. And then we don't wanna be notified via email. Let's give this a minute to load up. All right, now that it is loaded up, we can map these files that we have, randomly generated accounts, randomly generated contacts, and we can bring it over. So it's kind of difficult to tell. Let me just make sure again, this is accounts, cool. Bring this over to accounts, randomly generated. Let's bring this over to contacts, which is over here. And now that we have this file and this file mapped correctly, we'll go over to next. Hopefully you can see now how much more complicated you make a migration by how much data that you want to bring over. The more data you have to normalize, the more data you want to bring over, and the more data you have to associate, which can get really tricky. This is the most straightforward migration you could possibly have. The more data that you have, the more the complexity compounds, the more modules and data you want to bring over. So just keep that in mind. It's better to bring over less and just to get started than to bring over everything all at once. All right, so from here, we're just going to do account ID. So now Zoho understands the account unique identifier that I gave in this sheet, right, is the account ID. And then from contacts, let's save mapping here. We'll go over and contact UID, give it an identifier there. And then we want to make sure that the account has its account ID as well. So perfect, that's all associated correctly. And then we can do, I'm not gonna give a field for seniority and department. We're just going to go through save and next, and we've got everything mapped and ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and start the migration, and we'll just give this a moment to migrate everything over. Awesome, so now that this is completed, you can see the number of records that's been added. Let's just do a quick check here. So 66 accounts were brought over. Awesome, if we go here, we see 67. The reason that there's one missing is because the top row is just the column header, so it's not gonna bring that over. And then for contacts, let's see how many contacts we had. 257, 256. Again, there's just one missing because of the column headers. Awesome, so now that that has been brought over, let's just take one of these as an example, and we'll take Simon Villarreal, the last name. This is random data, by the way, just in case you're worried. Here's Simon. It's been added to our database. And then if we look at the account, it is highlighted because this is a lookup field and we can go over to Walgreens. Let's just spot check one other one. We'll do it random. Jaden Spinoza. Go to Jaden's record. And then you can see account name, Instagram. And then if we go to Instagram, we go over to contacts, we can see all the related contacts as well. So not only is our data in the right place inside of its individual object or record, right? When I say that, I'm talking about this data. Not only is it where we need on the record, this data is tied together and it's relating to the different objects. So contact is looking up to the account, and now the account is looking down to the contact, which keeps things nice and clean because this is a relational database. We had to get the data ready. Now I'm going to show you how to do this too because it's cool, and I just did this as a demonstration. So I'm going to go over to import history, and I can actually roll this back. So if you're ever doing this and you're like super worried about doing things wrong, all you have to do is undo import. So I'm going to go ahead and undo this import, and I am good to go. So if you make a mistake and you're like, I forgot to bring this data over. Oh, I messed this up and I related things wrong. Don't worry too much about it. You can just roll back any of the migrations. So everyone, thank you so much for watching this video. This is exactly how you can prepare your data, bring it into Zoho in the right way using the migration tool, and I will see you in the next one. All right, so I don't want to make this video 4 hours long, and I already have a 2-hour video going in depth on how to use Zoho CRM, and it's on my YouTube channel. You've probably already seen it, and if you haven't, go to my YouTube channel, just search for Zoho CRM. It'll be my 2-hour Zoho CRM training. I think it's just shy of 2 hours. And when you get to the training portion of the launch plan, where you get your team into the system, just send that video to everyone and say, hey, make sure to go through this. It's 2 hours long, and put it on 1.5x speed if you really want to. It's totally fine, but it's going to take anyone from a beginner to a power user in Zoho. That's really what you want. Don't worry too much about admin training for now, unless you have administrators. We can, it's kind of a different discussion. But for now, as far as getting power users in the system so that people don't just go Wild West mode when they actually get into Zoho CRM, make sure to send that video to everyone on your team so that they can get trained up for free. And with that, we're going to transition over to launch plan. Now, I've covered what I'm about to go over in other sections of this video. So if you're watching this video from beginning to end, then you are already done with the video. This is all just going to be a refresher. If you want to stick around, that's great. But just know if you went through the documentation section, then I've already covered this with you. So we're going to go over launch plan. And you can see we went over demonstration, documentation, customization, migration, train. If you have had a proper demonstration of Zoho and what it's capable of doing, so you're inspired, and you understand what it can do in the future and what you're building towards. You have your processes documented. You have your system customized to actually represent your documented processes. You've migrated your data over and your team is trained. Then it's time to launch. And there is a strategy behind launching correctly. So we're going to go over it. All right, so you can see here, this is the launch plan. You can make a copy of it below in the description. And these are the events that have to happen in order for you to have a successful launch. So first and foremost, you need that demonstration that can happen in a day. And this is essentially a sample model of what could occur for a successful CRM implementation, successful launch. And you can modify this to meet the needs of your organization because a data export sample migration can take a day or it can take months. So it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So you can either select a launch date and work your way back, but these are the different events that really need to occur in order to ensure a successful implementation. And while you can't 100% ensure a successful implementation, the idea behind the strategy is you do so much of the right things that it would be unreasonable for you to have a failed implementation or failed launch. So you've got demonstration. That's a section in this video. Documentation, customization. Those are also sections in this video. So if you skip past that and you want to go over it, you just need to document your processes and then customize the system to reflect those processes. And yes, that can all happen in a day. Do some light testing. Do some light testing because you're going to grant access to the rest of your the users in your system to actually go in and start using it before launch. That way, if there's any major issues before you launch, you can be aware of them there before you migrate all of your data over. So do some light testing for the users that will be training the week after or whenever you decide to get them in the system and have them train. Then you've got data export. And you want to make sure that you export a sample of your database. And essentially, your data export sample migration, it is a practice run for your full data export and full migration. So you can do all of your data, or you could do certain records from each object for a data export, and then a sample migration is in a full migration, and that you're just bringing over some of the records from some of the data export. You don't have to bring over everything. The idea here is you don't want to be doing a migration for the first time the business day before you launch. So you want to make sure that you do it in advance. Okay, so once you have your sample set of data in the system, you're going to add different users to Zoho. You can do this in waves, or if you have a smaller team, or if it's just you, then you just need to make sure you have access. Then you need to grant team training. So you don't want to give someone access to a system where you don't empower them to be successful through training. And if people aren't trained to use a system, they're not going to rise to the capabilities of a system. They're going to fall to the level of their training. So make sure people have good training. If you're going to use Zoho, make sure you have a partner's training. I've made mine available for free. So you can get Z training, give everyone access to Z training, or just send them the YouTube video that I made on Zoho CRM. That's going to have more than what they need. It's 2 hours and it will go over everything that a beginner needs to know so that they can become a power user in Zoho. So give them a week of training. Give yourself 5 business days to just stress test the system, play around with it, get a feel for it. It's really tough to have training and not access to the system because then you're learning things that are completely irrelevant to you. And you're just like, I don't really have access to play around with anything in a system. So for this training period, they are going to need to update records in either a spreadsheet or whatever system you're currently using before you move over. They're going to use both, but it just gives them time to see how all the dots connect between the system that they are using and then the system that they're moving towards, which would be Zoho in the case. A key thing to understand here about training as well. I can train you on how Zoho works as a technical system and then how to put your processes into the system. but I can't train you on your best practices. So make sure for your organization, whatever your best selling practices are, or your best marketing practices, whatever practices pertain to Zoho, make sure you train your team on how to do those things here as well. Specifically for your journey map, make sure they're trained on how to use this document. If you've customized it, make sure they have access to that document. All right, then you will go ahead and do some final testing after training. You'll go through the system and you'll just do another stress test. Make sure everything is good to go, and just make sure that your data is in the right places in the system. Make sure that your Kanban views you have customized, and you can use this implementation strategy as your checklist. Do you have everything documented? Is everything customized? Do you have your data migrated? Have you migrated your data over? And is everyone trained and comfortable with using the system at a basic level? And you may think to yourself, well, don't I need to go test all the custom functions that I've made? Well, I recommend that you use a very simple system with Zoho at first. And you may be used to your previous system, whether it be a previous CRM or previous software, or even a spreadsheet with some automations. You may be used to all those automations and think, well, I need all of those at first. You don't, and it will prolong the implementation by a lot if you try to mimic every little feature and functionality from your previous system. You're moving to a new system. Start with a simple system for Zoho, and then you can strategically add automations as you go. The more automations and integrations you try to do before your first launch, you are drastically slowing everything down. If you were going to do any kind of configuration, which is all about functionality, customization is all about presenting things or displaying things on the front end, configurations more on the back end, how things actually function. If you're going to do any kind of configuration before you launch, make sure you integrate all the Zoho apps together. That way, by the time you do a full migration, all of your data integrates properly with all the other applications. You don't have to use all the Zoho applications out of the box, but if you do the integration first, you're going to be set up for success by the time you want to move over. So that's an important strategic note there. Okay, so that's testing, and then you'll want to make sure that you do your migration the business day before you launch, and you'll want to do that later in the day on your least busy day of operations. The idea there is if you were to do this on your busiest day early in the day, you would have a lot of delta records or records that were created between the time that you actually did a full export and a full import into or migration into Zoho. And so you want to reduce the risk there for how many records are created and modified in the time that you do an export. So make sure that you do it later in the day and the business day before you launch. And with that, an important note here is communication. You want to make sure that you're communicating to your team when the final launch date is going to be. If there's any pushback on the date, depending on any technical difficulties with data, whatever it might be, just make sure your team is in the loop, and just make sure that they have a shared understanding of what's going on, and that you are keeping track in some document, in some calendar view, what's going to occur before you launch, and then share that with your team. Be extremely transparent. What's really confusing for users is when an admin, the leadership, management just says, hey, we're moving over without any explanation, without any training. It's going to mean a lot to your users. Ultimately, this is a system for them so that you can get the reports that you need and so they can be more effective with their operations. So with that, that is the launch plan. You can go ahead and make a copy of that. And once you have launched according to your launch plan, you have done as much as you can to ensure that you're how to be unreasonable for your Zoho implementation to be unsuccessful.